Well, I'm on my way into towards Nantwich. You wouldn't believe a 26-mile ride would take an hour, but it pretty much is gonna. So let's see if we can make it a bit more interesting, eh? So around this area, 25th of January 1644, there was a significant battle that took place. The intention was that the parliamentarians would stop the royalists from taking Nantwich after a siege that started in sort of December time, something like that. On this day, Lord Fairfax, leading the parliamentarians, said he could see the Royalist army at Acton Church. Now, I can't see it. I can't see the church from here at all. But it is possible the ground was completely different from this in the 17th century, so he may have had a clearer view than me. Thing is, he says that when he saw the Royalist army, he stopped and had a look at it, and they'd fired some cannon shot at him. But Hurleston is about 1 3/4 miles from the church, and cannon in those days only had a range of about 800 yards, so there's no way they were going to reach Hurleston from the church. Now, the church comes into sight for me. There it is. You can just see the steeple a little bit off to the left. There you go. And I'm about 1.5 miles away from that church now. Fairfax knew that the Royalist army was in two halves. One half of it was the east side of Nantwich, and the other half was the one he was looking at. And that Lord Byron was effectively outnumbered just at the moment. The problem Fairfax had was getting all of his troops together so he could attack straight away. And by the time he'd succeeded in getting all of his troops together, Byron had also succeeded in getting his troops over from the eastern side to the western side by the church. And Fairfax decided he really needed to go to Nantwich, meet up with the dragoons, and then come out and fight the next day. Now, this point is about as far as the cannon could reach from the church. It's right on the limits of what the cannon could do. But it depends on where they're positioned. If they were positioned in front of the church, they might just about reach here. If they're positioned at the back of the church, they probably wouldn't. But it takes specialised people to do all the calculations to determine elevation, charge, etc., to make sure that the cannon shot reaches. I reckon Fairfax was probably about 200 yards behind me. And the actual battle took place over to the left, in the fields running that way, along that main road there, probably straddling it, to be fair. And he went at 90 degrees across the fields to get to Nantwich, so he stayed out of artillery range. If he'd gone in a straight line from here to Nantwich, he'd come within artillery range at some point. So now we faced Byron across the way. Byron had cavalry and infantry to the right hand side of the church from here, and he had infantry regiments and cavalry regiment over to the left. The battle stretched over a total of 3 fields at least, and it started when Byron's cavalry and foot moved away from the church and started to go around the back of Fairfax's army, at which point he had the rear of his army turned to face it. By then, Byron's right wing had moved forward and they started to engage Fairfax's van, and they also had to hurriedly move from column formation to battle formation to meet the Royalist regiments. The Royalists engaged lastly in the middle. By now, the whole of Fairfax's army had turned into battle formation. Now, this is the church. This is where the Royalists at the end of the battle, after being beaten, ended up back here. They were surrounded and they were taken prisoner. They lost about 200 dead and 1,500 captured. And Lord Byron, with cavalry and infantry, had moved away to the right-hand side towards Chester. As we go around this road, the battle actually took place to the left. And what's going to happen is I'm going to shortly come to Nantwich. I'm going to find myself going in along Welsh Row. At Welsh Row, there's a bridge. That estate to the right-hand side, they had a Royalist garrison in there. They were mopped up a couple of days after the Battle of Nantwich had ended. Now, what actually happened was that on the day, the battle started about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And by sort of 5 o'clock, it was still being fought. Fairfax was not doing so well. Although Byron says that his own army had sort of betrayed him. He felt his centre had not engaged fully and had backed off and effectively betrayed him. There's no evidence that they did. I mean, there's nothing in Fairfax's reports that says that the fight was anything other than really keenly fought. And that was everywhere. Parliamentarians did something the Royalists didn't do. The parliamentarians were willing to put their cavalry down the lanes between the fields and fire through the hedges at their Royalist opponents. The Royalist cavalry tended to hang back. They didn't get involved too much because they felt the hedgerows prevented them from doing anything useful. Now we are coming up on Welsh Row now. And this was the decider. What happened here? Byron had ordered to have troops stationed at the bridge outside the town to prevent any troops from inside the town's garrison getting out. They failed. The garrison in Nantwich, seeing how the battle was going, charged out. They brushed those troops aside and they attacked the Royalist army from behind. So Byron's right wing collapsed first and started moving away. The centre then collapsed and started also moving away towards the church. And Byron himself, with his brother's cavalry and some infantry, moved away out of reach. They moved away towards Chester. That meant that Fairfax's right wing could swing around behind the church to block any escape route. And this is where they barged through this bridge here. And surround what was left of the Royalist army. And as I say, they killed 200 people in the battle and captured 1,500 prisoners at the church. I'm actually aiming to get to a lake. I'm going to park up and take some photographs. Then I'm going to set off home. I'm not using my sat nav, and I have a sneaking suspicion I should have turned right there. I have to wait a little bit and do a right turn a little bit further along, I think. Here we go. Turn here. Still don't know where I am. But if I keep turning right, I'm eventually going to end up at the lake, aren't I? I had a look before I left home to sort of try and memorise roughly the route I was going to be taking to get to this lake. Clearly didn't study it carefully enough, did I? But I was here last year, and I remember there's a road. Come away from the lake, and if I don't turn left, I end up over here somewhere, and there's a road on the right hand side that leads straight down to the lake. And I'm just wondering, whereabouts it might be. Some of these houses look a bit too new, so I'm going to carry on a little bit. Looks more like a housing estate than a street. There we go. This doesn't look too bad at all. Just as well, it says the road's closed ahead, and I'm not going to go that way. I'll come down here. Ah! Aha! I think that's it. There's definitely a bit of greenery up there, isn't there? So I'm sort of hoping this is going to put me in the right spot. Even from a little ways along the lake, it doesn't matter. But it's not though. There's the car park. That's where I'm actually headed to. Brill. I'm here. A lot more cars around than I thought there was going to be. I was kind of hoping midweek it'd be empty, but look at that, it's not. Now, I took a photograph, and only one photograph, and the reason for that is I got into a conversation with a chap in the car next to me. It was behind where this picture was taken. Quite an interesting chat I had with him. I think he might have been 15 years older than me. I hope he's not watching. I hope he's not watching if I've got that wrong. But he seems to have worked in similar kinds of industries to me, and he's had similar biking history to me. He started off on a BSA C15. I started off on a BSA Starfire. Kind of think he may be 15 years older than me if he was on a C15 as his first bike. It was a nice chat. So around for half an hour having a yap. Now I'm going to head off home. Now, again, it wasn't a particularly exciting ride getting in here, so I'm not expecting it to be any kind of an exciting ride getting home either. But you know, let's find my way out. Again, I haven't got my sat nav switched on. I brought it with me. I haven't switched it on though. Now look at that for a canal bridge. I've actually come along a bit of a bypass, so it's brought me out to that bridge as soon as I saw it and knew exactly where I was. And this is back at the just past the church, about 800 yards back home from the church. And I'm overtaking. And I'm toying with, yeah, I'm going to overtake again. And I'm sort of thinking, let's do it again. I would suggest I'm getting used to riding this bike. Ooh, look at that. Cheeky overtake again. Cheeky because I did 3. Cool. Yeah, I'm getting used to this bike. I'm getting used to the way it accelerates. Oh, look, another overtake. Sometimes it feels it's a bit sluggish going into a corner. We're going to overtake again. And sometimes it's sort of dives in like a buck on a doe. But I think that's more down to me than the bike. I think in reality when I get it right, this bike feels really good going through corners. It can really move. It ain't no slouch, telling you, it just is no slouch.